My name is Allison, and at 32, I never imagined my father would slap me across the face in my parents' living room. The penthouse I purchased in downtown Boston after years of financial sacrifices had somehow become the center of a family war. My younger sister Brooke believed she was entitled to my property, and my parents sided with her. The moment my father's hand struck my cheek was when I realized some family bonds aren't worth the pain they cause. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family for your own sanity. Growing up in a middle-class suburb of Boston, our family appeared normal from the outside. My parents, Margaret and Richard Thompson, maintained a carefully curated image of success and harmony. My father built his insurance business through relentless networking and strict adherence to traditional values. He was the undisputed head of our household, making all major decisions and expecting complete compliance. My mother, always the peacekeeper, deferred to him in all matters and focused on maintaining our home and social connections. Then there was my sister Brooke, 3 years younger and undeniably the favorite child. The pattern established itself early and remained consistent throughout our lives. When we were children, Brooke received the larger bedroom despite my being older. On Christmas mornings, her pile of presents always towered over mine. When I earned straight A's, my achievements were acknowledged with a nod, but when Brooke managed to pull a B in any subject, it warranted celebration dinners and excessive praise. Brooke is more sensitive than you, my mother would explain whenever I questioned the disparity. You're so independent and strong, Allison. You don't need as much encouragement. This dynamic extended far beyond material possessions. Brooke developed a pattern of making poor decisions, secure in the knowledge that our parents would bail her out. When she totaled her first car at 17 after driving to a party she was forbidden to attend, my father replaced it within a week. Meanwhile, I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout high school to save for my own vehicle. When college applications came around, I secured academic scholarships through relentless studying and extracurricular achievements. Brooke, whose grades were mediocre at best, attended an expensive private university fully funded by our parents. I worked throughout college, often taking night shifts at a local diner after full days of classes, while Brooke joined a sorority and called home for extra money whenever her generous allowance ran out. One particularly telling incident occurred during my college graduation. After receiving highest honors in finance, I looked for my family in the audience only to discover they'd left early because Brooke, home from college for the weekend, had organized an impromptu gathering with her friends that my parents didn't want to miss. When I arrived home still wearing my cap and gown, the house was filled with Brooke's friends, and my achievement went unacknowledged. My graduation gift was a $100 gift card. 3 years later, when Brooke finally graduated after an extra semester, my parents threw an extravagant party and gifted her a 2-week European vacation. Despite the clear favoritism, I continued striving for parental approval through achievement. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, saved enough, or succeeded enough, I would finally earn the recognition and love that seemed to come so effortlessly to Brooke. It was an exhausting pattern that followed me into adulthood. By the time I was 26, I had secured a position at one of Boston's top financial firms through merit alone. I worked 60-hour weeks, building my reputation and savings account simultaneously. Meanwhile, Brooke flitted between administrative jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months before quitting due to toxic work environments or unfulfilling duties. Each employment gap was subsidized by our parents, who always assured her that the right opportunity would come along. Brooke's financial irresponsibility extended to her personal life as well. She accumulated credit card debt buying designer clothes she couldn't afford and took luxurious vacations with money she didn't have. She dated a series of wealthy men, moving in with them within weeks of meeting, only to end up back in our parents' guest house when the relationships inevitably imploded. Throughout all this, our parents' support of Brooke never wavered. They co-signed loans, paid off debts, and provided a safety net that encouraged further recklessness. When I voiced concerns about this enabling behavior during a rare family dinner, my father dismissed me. "You don't understand how difficult things are for your sister," he said firmly. "Not everyone is as naturally disciplined as you are, Allison." My mother nodded in agreement. "Brooke is still finding herself. She needs our support, not criticism." The familiar sting of this double standard had long since dulled to a background ache, but it flared anew when I purchased my penthouse 3 years ago. What should have been a proud milestone became yet another source of family tension when Brooke complained that my showing off made her feel inadequate. Rather than congratulate me, my parents suggested I had been insensitive to buy such an impressive property when my sister was struggling. That moment marked the beginning of a new phase in our family dynamic, one where my success became not just overlooked, but actively resented. My career trajectory had been the product of methodical planning and relentless effort. After graduating with honors, I started in an entry-level analyst position, arriving first to the office and leaving last. While colleagues socialized after work, I took financial certification courses and built models that exceeded client expectations. This dedication didn't go unnoticed by management, if by my family. My big break came when I identified a critical error in a major investment portfolio that would have cost the company millions. The senior management team took notice, and within 3 years, I was promoted to senior financial analyst with a substantial salary increase and bonus structure. Unlike Brooke, I lived below my means. I rented a modest apartment, drove a practical car, and invested aggressively. By 29, I had saved enough for a substantial down payment on property, but I wanted something that represented the success I had worked so hard to achieve. When I found the penthouse in Boston's Seaport District, I knew immediately it was what I had been working toward. The 2-bedroom corner unit on the 27th floor featured floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the harbor. The building offered amenities I had never imagined having access to: a rooftop pool, 24-hour concierge, private gym, and resident lounge. At $1.2 million, it required financial stretching even with my substantial savings, but the investment value was undeniable in Boston's booming market. The day I signed the final papers, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I had experienced before. This purchase represented every extra hour worked, every social event sacrificed, every careful financial decision I had made. I had done this entirely on my own, without family connections, without parental assistance, without any safety net beyond the one I had constructed for myself. The penthouse became my sanctuary. I carefully selected each piece of furniture, opted for hardwood flooring upgrades, and installed custom lighting. I transformed the second bedroom into a home office with built-in bookshelves and a view that made even the most stressful workdays bearable. The kitchen, with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, became the setting for my newfound love of gourmet cooking. Every corner of this space reflected my personal achievements and evolving identity. Meanwhile, Brooke's life continued along its chaotic trajectory. After a string of failed relationships with wealthy men who eventually tired of financing her lifestyle, she moved back into our parents' guest house at 29. She described this move as temporary, while she regrouped, but months stretched into a year with no signs of independence on the horizon. Her employment history remained spotty at best. She worked briefly at a friend's boutique before quitting over a scheduling dispute. She tried selling luxury real estate, but couldn't maintain the necessary work ethic. She even launched a short-lived social media consulting business that consisted primarily of posting selfies from upscale locations while offering vague advice about personal branding. Each venture began with enthusiastic announcements and ended with elaborate explanations of why the opportunity wasn't aligned with her authentic self. The contrast between our lives became increasingly stark, creating tension that came to a head at a family dinner 3 months ago. I had just received a substantial promotion to investment director, overseeing a team of analysts and managing portfolios for the firm's highest net worth clients. The position came with a 6-figure salary increase and equity options that could potentially make me a millionaire several times over within 5 years. My father barely acknowledged the news with a curt, "That's nice, Allison," before turning the conversation to Brooke's latest interest in interior design, which consisted of her rearranging furniture in the guest house and creating Pinterest boards. My mother asked only if my new position would require even longer hours, her tone suggesting disappointment rather than concern. Brooke's response was the most telling. "Must be nice to be handed opportunities because you're good with spreadsheets," she said, swirling her wine. "Some of us have to create our own paths." The irony of this statement from someone living rent-free in our parents' guest house while I had built my career from nothing was not lost on me, but I had long since learned to keep such observations to myself. I simply smiled and changed the subject. What I didn't realize that evening was that my success had triggered something beyond the usual resentment. As I would soon discover, my penthouse had become the focal point of a plan that would upend my relationship with my family forever. In the months before our family imploded, I had begun an extensive renovation of my master bathroom, investing nearly $50,000 in imported Italian marble, a freestanding soaking tub, and a rainfall shower system. This project represented not just a home improvement, but a statement. I was putting down roots in a space that was entirely mine, created through my own efforts, reflecting my personal aesthetic and priorities. I had no idea that while I was selecting tile samples and fixture finishes, my sister was making very different plans for my home. The text message from my mother arrived on a Wednesday afternoon as I was preparing for a client presentation. "Family dinner Sunday at 5. Important discussion. Please be prompt." The formal tone was unusual enough to give me pause, but with a major work deadline looming, I simply confirmed my attendance and returned to my spreadsheets. When I arrived at my parents' colonial-style home that Sunday, the atmosphere was charged with an uncomfortable energy. My father stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch already in hand despite the early hour. My mother fussed nervously with appetizer platters that nobody was eating. Brooke sat on the couch, uncharacteristically well-dressed in a sleek black dress rather than her usual casual attire, repeatedly checking her phone. "You're late," my father noted, though my watch showed exactly 5 p.m. "I'm right on time," I corrected gently, accepting the glass of white wine my mother pressed into my hand. "We're waiting for one more person," Brooke announced with an air of importance. "Ryan is parking his car now." "Ryan?" I asked, confused. Brooke's dating life typically involved a rapid succession of men who appeared and disappeared within weeks, rarely achieving the status of being introduced to family. Brooke's face lit up with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. "My fiancé," she declared, extending her left hand to reveal a diamond ring that must have cost at least 5 figures, a surprising choice for someone who, to my knowledge, was currently unemployed. Before I could form a response, the doorbell rang. My mother rushed to answer it, returning with a tall, tanned man in his mid-30s. Ryan Fletcher had the confident swagger of someone accustomed to commanding attention. His tailored suit, designer watch, and meticulously styled hair screamed wealth, but something in his too-firm handshake and calculating eyes made me instantly wary. "Ryan is in real estate development," my father explained with unmistakable approval. "He's transforming a former industrial area in South Boston into luxury condominiums. 18 units starting at $1.5 million each," Ryan added, placing a possessive hand on Brooke's waist. "We're expecting to sell out before construction is even completed." "That's when we'll start looking for our next project," Brooke interjected eagerly. "Ryan is teaching me everything about the business. We're going to be partners in every way." My parents beamed with pride at this announcement. For the next 20 minutes, the conversation revolved entirely around Ryan's business acumen and Brooke's sudden interest in real estate development. My mother had apparently already begun researching wedding venues, while my father and Ryan discussed investment strategies as if they were longtime colleagues. As we moved to the dining room for dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that this elaborate scene had been staged for my benefit, though I couldn't imagine why. That question was answered as my mother served the main course. "So, Allison," Ryan began with a practiced casualness that immediately put me on alert. "Brooke tells me you have a fantastic penthouse in the Seaport District." "I do," I replied cautiously. "I've owned it for 3 years now." "The Beacon Building, right? Corner unit on the 27th floor." His specific knowledge of my home sent a wave of unease through me. "That's right," I confirmed, glancing at Brooke, who was studying her plate with unusual intensity. What a coincidence, Ryan continued, though nothing about this conversation felt coincidental. I've had my eye on that building for some time. The appreciation potential is remarkable. My father cleared his throat, setting down his fork with deliberate precision. Ryan and Brooke have a proposition for you, Allison. We think it makes a lot of financial sense. The synchronized way they all looked at me made it clear this proposition was the real purpose of the evening. I took a sip of water, preparing myself for whatever was coming. Brooke and I want to purchase your penthouse, Ryan stated plainly. As our first project together. We believe we could make significant improvements and flip it for a substantial profit. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. My home isn't for sale, I said finally. I have no interest in moving. We'd pay you fair market value, Brooke jumped in, though I noticed she didn't specify what they considered fair. Ryan has connections with contractors who could transform the space. It's a perfect starter project for us. You could easily find another place, my mother added, as if I had merely misplaced a sweater rather than being asked to surrender my home. Something more practical for a single person. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I'm very happy where I am. I've just invested in renovating the master bath, and I have no plans to sell. My father's expression hardened. Allison, you need to think about what's best for the family. This opportunity would give your sister and Ryan the foundation they need to start their business together. I'm not sure how my giving up my home benefits the family, I replied, struggling to keep my tone even. Don't be selfish, Brooke snapped. You know how much I've always loved that building. It would be perfect for us, especially with the wedding coming up. We could use the profit from the flip as a down payment on our forever home. The entitlement in her voice was staggering. I've worked incredibly hard for that penthouse, I reminded her. It's not just an investment property to me, it's my home. Nobody's saying you haven't worked hard, my mother placated, but family supports each other. You're in a position to help your sister start this new chapter. I'm happy to help in other ways, I offered. I could introduce you to real estate contacts through my firm, or help you analyze potential properties. Ryan leaned forward, his smile not reaching his eyes. The thing is, Allison, we've already secured investors based on this specific property. The unique layout and location of your unit is exactly what we need for our concept. The implication that they had made business plans involving my home before even speaking to me was stunning. I looked around the table, searching for any acknowledgement of how inappropriate this was, but found only expectant faces waiting for my capitulation. I'm sorry, but the answer is no, I said firmly. My home is not for sale, especially not as a flipping project. A heavy silence fell over the table. My father's jaw tightened in the way it always did before a storm. My mother's eyes filled with tears, her go-to response when not getting her way. Brooke's face flushed with anger. We're prepared to offer 10% above market value, Ryan pressed, apparently unaccustomed to rejection. The price isn't the issue, I explained. I don't want to sell my home. Period. My father set down his glass with a sharp click. You've always been stubborn, Allison. Always thinking only of yourself. The familiar accusation stung despite years of hearing variations of it. Wanting to keep my own home isn't selfish, I defended. After everything we've done for you, my mother added tearfully, though I couldn't recall any specific thing they had done for me in adulthood. I stood up, no longer hungry. I think I should go. This clearly isn't about dinner, and I've given my answer. Just think about it, Brooke called as I collected my purse. Don't make a decision tonight. I nodded noncommittally, eager to escape the suffocating disappointment filling the room. I'll see myself out, I said quietly. As I drove home, my phone began lighting up with messages. My mother sent emotional appeals about family loyalty. My father's texts were terse demands to reconsider your priorities. Brooke alternated between guilt trips and promises of generous terms. Over the next week, the pressure intensified. My parents enlisted extended family members to reach out, each armed with incomplete information that cast me as the villain. My Aunt Janet called to ask why I was standing in the way of Brooke's happiness. My cousin Thomas texted to remind me that family comes first. Even my grandmother, who rarely involved herself in family disputes, left a voicemail asking me to be kind to your sister. By Friday, I was emotionally exhausted and beginning to doubt my own judgment. Was I being unreasonable? Was my attachment to my home preventing my sister from moving forward in life? The lifetime of conditioning to put Brooke's needs first was difficult to overcome, even with the clarity of adulthood. When my father called demanding another family meeting to resolve this situation, I reluctantly agreed, hoping that a calm, face-to-face conversation might help them understand my position. I had no idea I was walking into a trap that would permanently alter my relationship with my family. I spent Saturday morning preparing for the second family meeting, organizing my thoughts and practicing setting clear boundaries. This wasn't about money or investment potential. This was about my right to maintain ownership of property I had legitimately earned. I even printed documentation of my mortgage payments, renovation investments, and current market valuations to demonstrate the financial and personal significance of my home. Arriving at my parents' house on Sunday afternoon, I was surprised to find Ryan's luxury SUV already in the driveway alongside my sister's car. I had expected this to be a family discussion, not another sales pitch. Taking a deep breath, I reminded myself that I was a successful, independent adult who did not need to justify her decisions to anyone. The scene that greeted me inside was worse than I anticipated. Spread across the dining room table were architectural renderings and mood boards, all featuring unmistakable images of my penthouse. Ryan stood at the head of the table in full presentation mode, while my sister hovered nearby, practically vibrating with excitement. My parents sat with expressions of proud anticipation, as if witnessing the launch of a major business rather than an ambush. "Perfect timing, Allison," Ryan said smoothly, gesturing to the chair they had left empty. "We were just reviewing the final concept boards." I remained standing, stunned by the presumption. "What is all this?" "Our vision for the space," Brooke answered eagerly. Ryan worked with an architect to redesign the layout. "We're thinking of taking down the wall between the kitchen and living area to create an open concept flow." The casual way she discussed demolishing parts of my home sent a chill through me. "I told you last week that I'm not selling. We thought once you saw the potential, you might reconsider," my mother explained, her tone suggesting I was being difficult for no reason. My father stood up, businessman mode fully activated. "Let's discuss this rationally, Allison. Ryan has prepared a formal offer letter with very generous terms." He pushed a document toward me, but I made no move to take it. "This isn't a negotiation," I stated firmly. "My home is not for sale to anyone at any price." Ryan exchanged a glance with my father before pulling out what he clearly thought was his trump card. "We've already had significant interest from potential buyers based on our proposed renovations. In fact, we conducted a private showing for select clients yesterday." The room seemed to tilt as his words registered. "You showed my penthouse to strangers? Without my knowledge or permission?" An uncomfortable silence fell as they realized the admission had backfired. "Brooke has a spare key for emergencies," my mother explained weakly. The clients were very discreet. The violation of my privacy and property rights was so outrageous that I momentarily struggled to form words. "You entered my home illegally and showed it to potential buyers when I've explicitly said it's not for sale?" "Don't be so dramatic," Brooke sighed. "It's not like we stole anything. We're trying to do something positive here." "Something positive for whom?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my best efforts to remain calm. "You violated my privacy, my property rights, and my clearly stated boundaries." "Now, Allison," my father interjected, using the patronizing tone he'd employed throughout my childhood, "this hostility isn't necessary. We're family discussing a business opportunity." "Family doesn't break into each other's homes," I countered. "Family doesn't try to pressure members into giving up their property. And family certainly doesn't make business plans involving assets they don't own." "We didn't break in," Brooke protested. "I have a key." "Which was for emergencies only," I reminded her. "Not for conducting unauthorized real estate tours." Ryan stepped forward, apparently deciding a different approach was needed. "Look, Allison, I understand you feel attached to the property. But you need to understand something too." His tone shifted from salesman to intimidator. "We've already invested considerable resources in this project. We have investors committed based on this specific property." The implied threat in his words was unmistakable. I turned to my parents, expecting them to recognize the inappropriate pressure being applied, but they were nodding in agreement. You need to consider the position you're putting your sister in, my father added. Her wedding plans depend on this deal going through. Her wedding plans depend on selling my home? I asked incredulously. How is that possibly my responsibility? Because your family, my mother insisted, as if this explained and justified everything. I can't believe we're even having this conversation, I said, gathering my untouched documentation. I'm not selling my home. You had no right to enter it without permission, no right to show it to anyone, and no right to make business plans assuming I would give it up. Brooke's face contorted with anger. You've always been so selfish. You know I've wanted to break into real estate for years, and now you're ruining my chance because you're too stubborn to help your own sister. Wanting to keep my own home isn't selfish, I repeated, feeling like I was taking crazy pills. Making plans to take someone else's property and being angry when they say no, that's selfish. Enough, my father interrupted, his face reddening. Allison, you will reconsider this position. The offer is more than fair, and your sister's future is at stake. My decision is final, I stated, turning toward the door. And I expect you to return my spare key immediately, Brooke. You ungrateful, my father began, following me toward the entryway. After everything this family has done for you, this is how you repay us? By standing in the way of your sister's happiness. I stopped, genuinely confused. What exactly has this family done for me? I worked my way through college while Brooke's education was fully funded. I saved for my own car, my own apartment, my own home, all while Brooke has received constant financial support. I've built my career through hard work while Brooke has bounced between jobs with no consequences because she always has your safety net. How dare you throw that in our faces, my mother gasped. We raised you, provided for you. You did the legal minimum required of parents, I corrected her. And you've consistently favored Brooke in every way possible since we were children. I'm not bitter about it anymore, I've made my peace with it. But I will not let that dynamic extend to giving up my home. My father stepped closer, his face now alarmingly red. You will not speak to your mother that way. You will show some respect and gratitude for everything we've done. I'm leaving now, I said, reaching for the door handle. This conversation is over. This conversation is over when I say it's over, my father shouted, grabbing my arm to prevent me from leaving. You are going to sit down and sign the papers Ryan has prepared. I pulled my arm free. No, I'm not. And if you ever enter my home without permission again, I will file trespassing charges. What happened next occurred so quickly that I barely had time to register it. My father's hand swung up and connected with my cheek with enough force to knock me back a step. The sharp crack of the slap seemed to freeze time for a moment as we all stood in shocked silence. My mother gasped. Ryan had the decency to look uncomfortable. Brooke's eyes widened briefly before her expression settled into something disturbingly like satisfaction. My father looked momentarily stunned by his own action before his face hardened again. You will show respect in this house, he said, his voice deadly quiet. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat rising where his hand had connected. In 32 years, my father had never struck me. For all his emotional manipulation and favoritism, physical violence had never been part of our family dynamic. Allison, my mother began in her placating voice, your father didn't mean. Don't. I cut her off, my voice steady despite the chaos of emotions within me. Don't make excuses for what just happened. You pushed him to it, Brooke said accusingly. You know how stressed he gets when you're difficult. The breathtaking victim blaming was the final straw. I opened the door, no longer caring about anything but escape. Allison, don't overreact, my mother pleaded. Let's all calm down and discuss this reasonably. There's nothing reasonable about any of this, I replied, stepping outside. And for the record, you just lost any chance of ever getting my penthouse. As I walked to my car on unsteady legs, I heard my father's voice behind me. You'll regret this attitude, Allison. Family is all you have in this world. Driving home, my cheek still stinging, I realized with perfect clarity that what I had just experienced wasn't family at all. It was ownership, control, exploitation. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to break free of it entirely. I barely remember the drive back to my penthouse. My body operated on autopilot while my mind replayed the shocking events in an endless loop. The architectural plans for my home. The admission they had entered without permission. The entitlement in their demands. And most vividly, the feeling of my father's hand striking my face, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. Entering my home, I immediately engaged the deadbolt and security chain, though I knew they wouldn't keep out someone with a key. I spent the night alternating between tears and rage, between doubt and clarity. By morning, one thing had crystallized in my mind: this pattern would never end unless I ended it. For years, I had accepted the role assigned to me, the strong, independent daughter who needed less support, less acknowledgement, less love. I had internalized the idea that my achievements were expected while Brooke's were exceptional. I had allowed my boundaries to be trampled in the name of family harmony. No more. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called Jessica Warner, an attorney I knew through professional connections. Her specialty was family law, and her reputation for directness matched my current mood. "I need legal protection from my family," I told her without preamble when we met at her downtown office an hour later. The words felt strange in my mouth, yet undeniably right. Jessica's expression remained neutral as I detailed the events of the previous day, though her eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of the unauthorized home showing. "Let me understand correctly," she said when I finished. "Your sister and her fiancé entered your property without permission, showed it to potential buyers without your consent, and when you refused to sell, your father physically assaulted you?" Hearing it summarized so starkly made me flinch. "Yes. And you have reason to believe they still have access to your property?" "My sister has a spare key I gave her years ago for emergencies." Jessica nodded, making quick notes. "We have several immediate concerns. First, securing your property. Second, documenting the assault. Third, establishing clear legal boundaries." By noon, I had a comprehensive action plan. I left Jessica's office and headed directly to a nearby urgent care facility, where a doctor documented the fading bruise on my cheek, and I filed a formal report of the incident. I didn't want to press charges, at least not yet, but having the record felt necessary. Next, I contacted a locksmith who agreed to meet me at my penthouse that afternoon to change all the locks. While waiting for his arrival, I called my building's management company to revoke any guest access privileges previously granted to my family members and to flag any attempts by them to gain entry to the building. The locksmith had just finished installing the new deadbolt when my phone began ringing, my mother's number. I declined the call, only for my father's number to appear seconds later. Then Brooke's. Then my mother's again. I silenced my phone and focused on the next steps in my plan. A security company arrived shortly after the locksmith departed. Within hours, my penthouse was equipped with a state-of-the-art security system including door and window sensors, motion detectors, and cameras monitoring all entry points. The technician walked me through the smartphone app that would alert me to any attempted entry and allow me to view live feeds from anywhere. As evening approached, I finally checked my messages. 12 voicemails and 27 text messages, all variations on the same themes. I was overreacting. My father had barely touched me. I was tearing the family apart over a minor disagreement. I was being selfish and dramatic. I needed to call immediately to fix this situation. Not one message contained an apology. I forwarded the most threatening voicemails to Jessica before blocking all their numbers. The immediate sense of relief that followed confirmed I was making the right choice. The next morning, I met with my firm's head of security, Michael Chen. Though my family situation was personal rather than professional, he agreed to review my building's security protocols and suggest additional measures. By the end of our meeting, I had arranged for doorman notification if any of my family members attempted to enter the building and established a direct line to building security on my phone's speed dial. While these security measures addressed my immediate concerns, I knew from experience that my family, particularly my father, didn't give up easily when challenged. I needed to understand exactly what I was facing with Ryan's supposed real estate venture. I reached out to Daniel Reynolds, a colleague who specialized in real estate investment analysis. Without sharing the personal details, I asked him to look into Ryan Fletcher's development company and recent projects. "I'll see what I can find," Daniel promised. Any specific concerns I should focus on? Legitimacy, I replied. Investment structures, permit applications, anything that would verify this is a genuine operation rather than a paper company. While awaiting Daniel's findings, I took one more critical step. After consultation with Jessica, I drafted a formal cease and desist letter addressing the unauthorized entry to my home, the prohibition against future contact with my building or property, and explicit statements that my penthouse was not for sale under any circumstances. Jessica's paralegal delivered copies to my parents' home and Ryan's business address that same afternoon. By Friday, just 5 days after the confrontation, I had transformed from a victim of family manipulation to a woman firmly in control of her boundaries. The security systems were in place, legal documentation was filed, and professional allies were engaged. Yet something still felt unfinished. That missing piece fell into place when Daniel called with his findings about Ryan Fletcher's business operations. "I don't know what your interest in this guy is," he began, "but you might want to proceed with caution. His development company exists on paper, but there's not much substance behind it. He's been involved in 3 projects in the last 5 years, and 2 of them collapsed before completion when investors pulled out. What about the South Boston project he's supposedly working on now?" I asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Daniel continued. "He has filed preliminary permits, but the financing looks shaky at best. He's been telling potential investors that pre-sales are strong, but I could only confirm 2 actual contracts. The rest are verbal commitments or pending signatures." "What about his client list? Has he been showing properties to potential buyers?" "Not officially. No scheduled open houses, no broker events. If he's showing properties, it's all off-book." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Ryan wasn't a successful developer teaching Brooke the business. He was a struggling operator looking for financial backing. My penthouse wasn't their starter project, it was probably the only viable asset they could access through family connections. The urgency wasn't about Brooke's wedding plans, it was about Ryan's precarious business situation. "One more thing," Daniel added. "He's been sued twice by early investors claiming misrepresentation of project timelines and returns. Both cases settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements, but the pattern isn't encouraging." I thanked Daniel for his research and sat back, processing this new information. My sister wasn't just being her usual entitled self, she had aligned with someone potentially engaging in fraudulent business practices. And my parents, in their eagerness to support Brooke's latest venture, had failed to perform even basic due diligence. This wasn't just about protecting my property anymore. This was about exposing a scheme before my family became financial victims as well as moral accomplices. I contacted Jessica immediately. "I need to add something to our strategy," I told her, explaining what I'd learned about Ryan's business practices. "This changes things," she agreed. "We need to document everything in case this escalates to securities fraud territory." By the end of the day, we had expanded our approach. In addition to the legal and security measures already in place, Jessica helped me prepare a detailed documentation package, including Ryan's litigation history, project failures, and the unauthorized showing of my property to supposed investors. As I reviewed the comprehensive strategy we'd developed, I realized I had never approached a personal problem with such thoroughness before. My professional skills, analysis, planning, risk assessment, were proving invaluable in this most personal of battles. For the first time in my life, I was treating my family situation with the same strategic seriousness I brought to my career. That night, I slept soundly for the first time since the confrontation. My home was secure. My boundaries were established. And I was prepared for whatever came next. What I couldn't have prepared for was how quickly and dramatically the situation would escalate once my family realized I was fighting back. The cease and desist letter arrived at my parents' home on Monday morning. By noon, the carefully constructed wall of silence I had built began to crack under an onslaught of attempted communications. Though I had blocked their numbers, my family found creative ways to reach me: emails from new addresses, messages through mutual connections, even a delivery of my mother's guilt-inducing lasagna with a note begging me to call. I maintained my silence, following Jessica's advice to avoid any communication that wasn't through official legal channels. This strategy proved wise when, by Wednesday, the tone of their outreach shifted from pleading to threatening. "You've made the biggest mistake of your life," read an email from my father's business account that had slipped through my filters. "Family doesn't treat family this way. There will be consequences for this betrayal." I forwarded the message to Jessica, who added it to our growing documentation file. On Thursday afternoon, my assistant interrupted a client meeting with an urgent message. My parents and Brooke were in the reception area of my office building, demanding to see me. I excused myself from the meeting and called building security, who escorted them out. The public scene they created was documented in incident reports that Jessica promptly added to our file. By Friday, Ryan had entered the fray with his own threatening email. "Your actions are interfering with legitimate business operations and causing financial damages. If you continue this obstruction, we will have no choice but to pursue legal remedies." This was exactly the opening we had been waiting for. Jessica responded with a detailed letter addressing his claims, attaching documentation of his previous failed projects, lawsuits, and the unauthorized entry into my property. The letter concluded with a clear warning that any legal action he initiated would result in counterclaims for trespassing, harassment, and potentially fraudulent business practices. The bomb had been dropped. Now we waited for the fallout. It came the following Monday in the form of a thick envelope delivered to my office. Inside was a formal letter from my father disowning me as his daughter, removing me from his will, and declaring that I was no longer welcome in the family home. Accompanying this declaration was a handwritten note from my mother, tearfully claiming that I had destroyed the family with my selfish actions and legal attacks. Though I had intellectually prepared for this outcome, the emotional impact was still substantial. I had spent my entire life seeking approval from these people, working to earn the love that seemed to flow so effortlessly to Brooke. Now I was officially excised from the family for the crime of protecting my own property and boundaries. I allowed myself one evening of grief, one bottle of wine, one box of tissues, one night of mourning the family I had always wanted but never truly had. By morning, I was ready to move forward with the next phase of our strategy. Jessica and I had anticipated that my family might retreat once their legal vulnerability was exposed, but we had also prepared for escalation. The disownment letter indicated they were choosing the latter path, so we proceeded accordingly. The documentation package we had compiled about Ryan's business practices was sent to 3 carefully selected recipients: my father's business attorney, who had a fiduciary duty to warn his client of potential liability, Brooke's personal email, providing her one last chance to recognize the precarious position she was in, and the state licensing board that oversaw real estate development projects. We didn't have to wait long for a response. Within 48 hours, my father's attorney reached out to Jessica requesting a confidential meeting to discuss matters of mutual concern. Jessica agreed, with the condition that no family members would be present, only legal representatives. The meeting revealed exactly what we had suspected. My father's attorney had been unaware of Ryan's business history or the unauthorized entry into my property. His professional reputation was potentially at risk due to his client's actions, and he was clearly motivated to find a resolution that would minimize damage to all parties. My client was not fully informed of certain aspects of the situation, he admitted carefully. "Having reviewed the documentation you've provided, we believe there may have been some misunderstandings that escalated unnecessarily." Translation: my father had discovered that Ryan's business was not what it appeared to be, and now he was looking for a way to back down without admitting he was wrong. Jessica maintained our position. My client requires written acknowledgement of the property violations, formal apologies for the harassment and assault, and legally binding commitments to cease all contact unless expressly initiated by my client. The attorney promised to present these terms to my father, though his grimace suggested he anticipated resistance. Meanwhile, the licensing board had opened a preliminary inquiry into Ryan's business practices based on our documentation. Though the process would take months to complete, the immediate effect was apparent when Ryan's business partner Marcus Stewart called me directly, bypassing both Jessica and my blocked number list. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded when I answered the unknown number. The licensing board just froze our permit applications pending some kind of investigation. I provided documentation of unauthorized property showings and questionable investor communications. I replied calmly. If your business practices are legitimate, you have nothing to worry about. His tone shifted immediately. Look, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. Ryan sometimes gets enthusiastic about potential projects. If he crossed any lines regarding your property, I assure you it wasn't with my knowledge or approval. The desperation in his voice told me everything I needed to know. Ryan's business was in trouble, and his partner was now in damage control mode. Any further communication should go through my attorney, I told him before ending the call. The following day brought the first crack in my family's united front. A text message from Brooke appeared on my work phone, which I had forgotten to block. We need to talk. Not about the penthouse. About Ryan. Please. After consulting with Jessica, I agreed to a meeting in a public location with specific conditions. Brooke would come alone. The meeting would last no more than 30 minutes, and any attempt to discuss my property would end the conversation immediately. She agreed to all terms. We met at a coffee shop near my office, a location busy enough to discourage scenes but private enough for conversation. Brooke arrived looking nothing like the confident, entitled sister who had demanded my penthouse. Her designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a simple sweater, her typically perfect makeup was minimal, and the enormous engagement ring was conspicuously absent. Ryan lied to me, she began without preamble, her voice low and tense. About everything. His business, his finances, his previous projects, all of it. I sipped my coffee, letting her continue without interruption. When Dad received that documentation from your lawyer, he hired a private investigator to look into Ryan's background. It's worse than what you sent. He has 2 ex-wives he never told me about, both of whom left him over financial deceptions. His South Boston project is on the verge of collapse. And those investors he brought to see your penthouse? They weren't real clients, they were friends playing along to impress me and Mom and Dad. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her untouched coffee cup. The engagement is off. Dad's trying to determine if there's any legal exposure from our association with Ryan's business. And Mom's a mess. She keeps saying we've lost both daughters now. You haven't lost me, I said quietly. You tried to take my home, invaded my privacy, and supported Dad when he assaulted me. Those actions have consequences, but they don't make us not sisters. Tears welled in Brooke's eyes. I don't know how things got so out of control. I was so excited about Ryan, about finally having a direction, about making Mom and Dad proud. When he suggested your penthouse as our first project, it seemed perfect. I never thought about it from your perspective. That's been the pattern our whole lives, I observed. You wanting something, our parents supporting that desire, and no one considering my perspective or needs. She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I know. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that Ryan is out of our lives and I'm sorry. For everything. It wasn't a perfect apology, it lacked specific acknowledgement of all the boundary violations, but it was more self-awareness than Brooke had ever demonstrated before. As we parted ways, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, lingering anger, cautious hope, and a new sense of standing on equal footing with my sister for perhaps the first time in our lives. The final pieces fell into place over the following weeks. My father's attorney delivered formal signed statements acknowledging the unauthorized entry into my property, retracting all claims to my penthouse, and committing to no contact unless initiated by me. These documents stopped short of admitting assault, but Jessica assured me they provided all the legal protection we needed. Ryan's business partnership dissolved as the licensing board investigation progressed, with Marcus Stewart publicly distancing himself from his former partner's unethical business practices. Through industry connections, I learned that Ryan had left Boston, reportedly headed to Florida to pursue other opportunities. My mother made several attempts to reconcile without addressing the underlying issues, sending cards filled with pleas to put this unpleasantness behind us and be a family again. I returned each one with a simple note: I'm open to rebuilding our relationship when you're ready to acknowledge what happened and commit to respecting my boundaries. Throughout this period of upheaval, I found unexpected support from extended family members who had witnessed the dysfunctional dynamics for years, but never intervened. My cousin Rachel called to say she had experienced similar treatment from my parents when she chose a career they didn't approve of. "They froze me out for 2 years," she confided. "I always admired how you stayed true to yourself despite their pressure." My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, reached out with surprising insight. "Your mother enables your father's worst tendencies, and they both enabled Brooks. Breaking that pattern took courage. I should have said something years ago." These connections helped ease the pain of family estrangement and confirmed what I had begun to suspect. The dysfunctional dynamics I had experienced weren't just in my head. Others had seen them too, even if they had remained silent. 6 months after my father's hand struck my face, the legal battles were resolved, the business threats neutralized, and new boundaries firmly established. I had proven to my family, and more importantly, to myself, that I would no longer participate in the dysfunctional system that had defined our relationships for decades. The penthouse that had been the catalyst for this transformation had never felt more like home. 6 months can change everything or nothing at all. In my case, it changed everything that mattered while leaving the physical surroundings largely the same. My penthouse still offered the same breathtaking views of Boston Harbor. My career continued its upward trajectory with a newly announced partnership position. Even my daily routines remained similar: morning runs along the waterfront, evenings spent with books or friends, weekends filled with cultural events or quiet reflection. What had changed, profoundly and permanently, was my internal landscape. The first noticeable difference was the absence of constant anxiety. I hadn't realized how much energy I had expended trying to manage my family's expectations and demands until that burden was lifted. Without the background hum of anticipated criticism, I found myself sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and laughing more easily. The second change was in my social connections. With the emotional space previously occupied by family drama now available, I invested more deeply in friendships. My circle expanded to include colleagues who became confidants, neighbors who became weekend hiking companions, and even Jessica, whose professional guidance had evolved into mutual respect and occasional dinners. The third transformation was in my relationship with my home. What had once been primarily a symbol of professional achievement became a true sanctuary. I completed the bathroom renovation that had been interrupted by family chaos, this time adding personal touches that prioritized comfort over resale value. I converted the guest room into a combination home office and library, with built-in bookshelves housing my growing collection of first editions. Each modification reflected choices made solely for my satisfaction, without consideration of others' opinions. My contact with family during this period was minimal but not non-existent. True to my word, I maintained the boundaries established through Jessica's legal work. No family member attempted to visit my penthouse or workplace, and all communication occurred through channels I explicitly approved. My father's acknowledgement of his actions came 3 months after the confrontation, delivered via certified mail on his law firm's letterhead. The single-page letter read more like a legal settlement than a personal apology. I acknowledged that physical contact occurred during our disagreement on date. While perceptions of the incident may differ, I regret any distress caused and commit to respecting established boundaries going forward. The carefully worded non-apology was exactly what I expected from a man who had never admitted fault in his life. I filed it with my other legal documents without emotional response. My requirements had been for acknowledgement and future boundary respect, not genuine remorse I knew he was incapable of offering. My mother's approach followed her established pattern of emotional appeals without accountability. Weekly cards arrived containing variations on the same themes. She missed me. The family wasn't complete without me. Couldn't we put the misunderstanding behind us? Each message carefully avoided mentioning my father's assault or their attempts to take my property, instead framing the estrangement as a mysterious event that had occurred without cause or context. After 2 months of these missives, I responded with a brief, direct letter outlining what I needed to consider reconciliation, acknowledgement of specific boundary violations, commitment to future respect, and family therapy with a professional of my choosing. The card stopped for 3 weeks before resuming with slightly modified content, now including phrases like, "We all made mistakes," and "families sometimes hurt each other." It wasn't progress, but it was movement. I continued filing the cards without response. Brooke's evolution proved most surprising. Following our coffee shop meeting, she maintained respectful distance, sending only a brief text on my birthday and a congratulatory email when my partnership was announced in the financial press. In April, she requested a second meeting, again in a public location. "I've started therapy," she announced when we met, pride evident in her voice. "Twice weekly." "It's been revealing." "In what way?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I'm beginning to see patterns. How I learned to perform helplessness to get attention. How I define my worth through dad's approval and mom's protection." She twisted her napkin nervously. "How I used you as a measuring stick for my own value, always needing to have more or be more to feel adequate." The self-awareness was startling coming from someone who had never demonstrated capacity for introspection. I listened as she detailed her progress in finding employment, an entry-level position at a legitimate real estate firm, securing her own apartment, modest but independently maintained, and building relationships based on mutual respect rather than utility. "I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were," she clarified. "That wasn't healthy for either of us. I just wanted you to know I'm doing the work to understand my part in what happened." We parted with a tentative plan to meet again in a month, neither rushing toward reconciliation nor closing the door on possible future relationship. The most unexpected development came through my cousin Emily, who reached out after hearing about the family rift. Though we had been friendly at family gatherings, we had never been close. Her call one Sunday afternoon changed that. "I've been where you are," she said without preamble. "Different circumstances, but same family dynamics. Uncle Richard and Aunt Margaret did to you what my parents did to me, established a golden child/scapegoat dynamic that was impossible to break without walking away." Over the following weeks, Emily and I discovered striking parallels in our experiences. Her younger brother had received the same preferential treatment Brooke had enjoyed, with Emily cast in the role of the strong, independent child who needed less support. She had broken the pattern 3 years earlier after a similar escalation of boundary violations. "The guilt nearly broke me," she admitted during one of our now regular Sunday calls. "I kept thinking I was a terrible daughter, a selfish person, all the labels they'd given me. It took months of therapy to recognize I wasn't rejecting family, I was rejecting abuse disguised as family loyalty." Emily became both guide and companion on my journey toward healing. Having walked the path before me, she offered perspective on the stages of grief, anger, and eventual peace that accompanied family estrangement. More importantly, she provided living proof that it was possible to build a fulfilling life outside the dysfunctional family system we had both escaped. Through these conversations with Emily, therapy sessions with Dr. Lauren Fisher, and continued reflections on my own experiences, certain truths crystallized with remarkable clarity. First, true love doesn't require the sacrifice of dignity or boundaries. The conditional acceptance my parents had offered, available only when I complied with their expectations, wasn't love at all, but control masquerading as affection. Second, enabling harmful behavior isn't kindness. My lifelong pattern of accommodating Brooke's entitlement and my parents' favoritism hadn't helped any of us grow or improve. It had merely perpetuated damaging patterns that ultimately led to crisis. Third, and perhaps most importantly, self-respect must precede any healthy relationship. My desperate need for parental approval had led me to accept treatment I would never tolerate from friends or colleagues. Establishing firm boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary for authentic connection. The practical application of these insights manifested in December, when the question of holiday plans arose. In previous years, I had automatically arranged my schedule around family gatherings, regardless of personal cost or preference. This year, I chose differently. I hosted a chosen family Christmas dinner in my penthouse for Emily and her partner, Jessica and her husband, and several close friends who were remaining in Boston for the holidays. We cooked together, exchanged thoughtfully selected gifts, and created new traditions free from historical tensions. The evening was filled with genuine laughter and conversation that left me feeling energized rather than depleted. As we gathered around my dining table, the one I had selected solely because I loved it, not because it would impress others, I looked at the faces of people who valued me for exactly who I was, not who they needed me to be. The contrast with family gatherings of the past couldn't have been starker. Later that evening, after my guests had departed, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows watching snow fall gently over the harbor. The penthouse that had nearly been taken from me had become more than property. It was the physical manifestation of my journey towards self-determination. Each room held evidence of choices made with integrity, boundaries established with courage, and a life built on authentic values rather than external expectations. My phone chimed with a text message from Brooke. Merry Christmas. I hope today brought you joy. Simple, respectful of boundaries, with no manipulation or demands. I responded in kind, recognizing the small but significant shift in our communication pattern. The path forward remained uncertain. True reconciliation with my parents would require changes I wasn't confident they could make. The established dynamics of decades don't transform overnight, and some relationships may never evolve beyond the careful distance of managed boundaries. Yet I found myself approaching this uncertainty with unexpected peace. Whatever the future held with my family of origin, I had broken the cycle that had constrained me for 32 years. I had established what I would and would not accept in relationships. I had discovered the liberation that comes from prioritizing self-worth over approval-seeking. Most importantly, I had learned that standing firm in one's truth, even when it costs relationships, even when it brings pain, even when it requires rebuilding one's understanding of family, leads to a freedom no penthouse, no career achievement, no external validation could ever provide. The journey continues, with challenges and setbacks alongside growth and discovery. But now I walk that path as the author of my own story, not a character in someone else's. And that makes all the difference. What boundaries have you had to establish in your own life? Has standing up for yourself ever cost you relationships? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of personal growth through difficult situations, and share with anyone who might need encouragement to stand firm in their own truth. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth is never contingent on someone else's approval.